Good afternoon, folks. I'd like to welcome you all to our meeting this evening. I'd like to acknowledge and thank all of our media partners who are here tonight, either broadcasting our meeting or writing about it. And I'll pass it on to Madam Clerk to begin the meeting. Thank you.
Okay, under agenda item 1, I have a motion by Councillors Hollingsworth and Bruni that the minutes of regular council meeting of February 8, 2016 be approved.
All in favor? Carried.
And under agenda item 3, declaration of pecuniary interest, I have Councillor Nero declaring a conflict under agenda item 6.4, administration of retiree death benefit, as his brother is employed by the Sault Ste. Marie Fire Service, and Councillor Krampotic under agenda item 6.2, retention of restructuring lawyer, as he's employed by SR Steel Algoma. Are there other conflicts?
Councillor Turco.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. 6.4, administration of the retiree death benefit, spouse employed by the police services.
Thank you. Councillor Romano.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Under item 6.3, property tax appeals, one of the applicants is a client of mine, so I'm not sure if I should be declaring a conflict on the entire resolution as a result of that.
That's fine. It's one report. We'll note it. Anything else, Council? Councillor Bruni.
The notice of motion, the EDC review, family member?
Yeah, there won't be, but
Just
noted.
in case.
Very good. Anything else, Council? Thank you.
Yeah, under agenda item 4, a motion by Councillors Hollingsworth and Fata that the agenda for February 22, 2016 City Council meeting as presented be approved.
All in favor? Carried.
Under agenda item 5.1, 2015 Heritage Award presentation, Cindy Parniak, the 2015 Heritage Award recipient, is in attendance.
Ms. Parniak is in attendance. Cindy, why don't you come up to the microphone here so everybody can see you?
Hello, everybody.
Welcome to Council, Cindy.
Thank you.
I'm not sure if the Heritage Committee has anything beyond what I have. It's just my materials. Oh, Lloyd is here too. Oh, nice. That's great. Lloyd, welcome to Council. So, no, we want you to stay up there. Yeah. Thank you. So the Municipal Heritage Committee Award is presented annually by the Corporation of the City of Sault Ste. Marie to recognize property owners who have worked hard to preserve, restore, and enhance the city's heritage resources. On behalf of the City Council and the Municipal Heritage Committee, I would like to congratulate Ms. Cindy Parniak, the recipient of the 2015 Municipal Heritage Committee Heritage Award. Ms. Parniak's property is located at 1164 Queen Street East and is a beautiful 1.5-story prairie-style residence. The home was built in 1916 for grocer William H. Ewing.
Yes,
Did I say that correctly?
correct. That's correct, yes.
Ms. Parniak has spent countless hours working on restoring the property and the grounds. And I can certainly attest to that because I drive by the home every day and nary a day where she's not outside taking care of things. The home's interior retains much of its original woodworking, while the landscaping includes well-kept flower beds and distinctive marble statues. 2 marble lions grace the side entrance of the house. Congratulations to Ms. Parniak, a most deserving recipient of the 2015 Municipal Heritage Committee Award. I'd like to now call on Lloyd Beelhartz, Chair of the Municipal Heritage Committee, to help present the award. Lloyd, do you want to come up this way?
We move to consent. I should point out that under agenda item 6.15, I believe it says the Commissioner of Community Services. It should actually say the Commissioner of Social Services. I have a motion by Councillors Hollingsworth and Fata that all items listed under date February 22, 2016, Part 1, consent agenda be approved as recommended.
Okay, we'll go through the matters on consent then. So do any councillors want to address any of the matters on consent? Councillor Butland, we'll start with you.
6.2, Mr. Mayor?
Surprise, surprise, 6.2.
I was going to say, I know I'm surprising you.
Yeah, go ahead, Councillor Butland.
Well, first of all, I'll deal with the exact, the report, the retention, the restructuring lawyer. Melanie gave me a layperson's interpretation as to why it is absolutely necessary, and I've checked out with other folks, and they said, yes, you need to do this. But I think for the benefit of the community, the upset limit of 175, why would it possibly reach that amount of monies that we might have to expend? In layperson's terms, could you explain the complexity of this exercise?
We'll start with the city solicitor, and then if the CAO has anything he wanted to add after, he can add.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Butland. As the report indicates, we're seeking funds up to the upset limit of $175,000. And just to kind of put into perspective what these proceedings are about, these proceedings are generated in the City of Toronto. It's through this Ontario Court of Justice commercial list. And in that respect, a court monitor has been appointed, Ernst & Young, who's overseeing the entire proceedings. There are multiple hundreds of creditors involved in these proceedings. It's a highly complicated proceeding. To date, approximately 13 motions have already been filed by various creditors or the actual SR folks involved in the proceedings. And for each motion, there is a canvass by our lawyers that we have retained whether or not we need to, on behalf of the city, file materials in dealing with the motion materials. So that is one aspect of the costs involved here, the ongoing monitoring of the actual proceedings. And our lawyers in Toronto are in regular contact with us as a new event happens. They will liaise with us to see if, in fact, something is necessary from the city's perspective, which in some instances to date there has not. There may be in the future some instances that there will be the necessity of doing so. However, the upreach limit of $175,000 was put out there in the event that it was to go the full distance. So that means filing a proof of claim, which is due this coming week, actually on February 26th. That is the actual claim to secure and represent the city's actual total tax dollars that are owing, plus a few ancillary dollars that are owing here. Those costs are not that significant. That's approximately $8,000 up to today's date. Thereafter, we don't anticipate much occurring unless there are motions that we do need to respond to. However, we do wish council to be aware of the fact that if it does go the distance and there are contested matters there, that there is that upset that could be reached. And in the end, also to enforce the actual orders that could result as a result of these proceedings, then there could be monies that have to be expended as well for those issues. So we wish to advise council of the full gamut at this stage. We will be taking it a step by step. It's going to be a lengthy proceeding as we see how things go, but we're hopeful and we're going to keep costs at a minimum as possible, but we do wish council to be aware of the upset limit.
Sure. Did you want to add anything to that, Mr. Horseman? No, okay. Councilor Brady?
How long are we looking at?
That's a very good question. Right now, it depends on how long it takes for SR to come up with its plan of arrangement. Right now, they requested an extension of the stay order. Essentially what happens is to engage in CCAA proceedings, a stay is in effect, which means that no creditors can advance any interest against them as they're coming up with their plan of arrangement. They've now been given an extension from December now through till March 15th is their new magic date. From that point on, depending on how their dealings go, and that could be a variety of scenarios that they're looking at, it could be further extended along the way, and there's no limit there. The monitor is certainly going to oversee and make sure that they're progressing as quickly as possible and protecting everyone's interest there, and will step in if in fact something is necessary to do so. We will certainly advise council if there's any major steps that are involved, and report back.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah, I think I have Councillor Romero next and Councillor Christian, but before we move on, I think it's important, Ms. Borowitz-Semenik, this isn't just about protecting the city's interest in the $50 million of arrears. This is so the city can actually take a position in the hearings to any positions a party might take that's adverse to the city.
That's
Right.
correct, Mr. Mayor. Absolutely, that is correct. If we don't make a statement now with a proof of claim, we are barred from advancing or participating in the proceedings. So it's very critical, as Mr. Mayor has indicated, to do so.
If a restructuring proposal was put forward or a proposal was put forward that the city didn't think was in the city's interest, the city has to be a party to these proceedings to actually communicate the city's position.
That's correct.
Councillor Romero?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you to our Ms. Sorry, to our
Borowitz-Semenik.
legal, Borowitz-Semenik, yes. I was tongue-tied there for a moment. Doesn't happen that often, I guess. My question is this. I know in the materials we were provided your letter of January 8th, 2016, which was generally speaking a request for proposals or request for quotations from various firms. Was this circulated throughout our own community's legal departments?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Romano, this was, there was an evaluation team that was constructed between myself, the CAO, and the Commissioner of Finance. And what we did was we looked at current vendors of record who worked on behalf of the municipality. Also, we sought out recommendations from other municipalities who have experienced these sorts of proceedings in the past, and came up with a list of about 20 firms. And from that, we met and looked at the various variables that are listed in the report, including law firms that have had experience in this particular type of restructuring, and sought out 6 from there. There were no local law firms that were on the list of 6.
And I'm going to assume then that there was no local law firms as well in the initial group of 20 or something or other?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Romano, there were a couple of law firms in the Sault Ste. Marie area that were on the list of 20 in terms of being vendors of record. However, given the various other factors that were involved, they were not on the 6 that were canvassed.
I guess this is less of a question and more of a comment. Whether now is appropriate or later, I'll leave it to you, Mr. Mayor.
You can make a comment now, Councillor Romano, because I only think we have one or two more questions left on this topic.
I'm a little concerned that given the complexity of the matter, I appreciate the complexity of the matter, but we do have a lot of, and I'm not speaking on my own behalf here, but we do have a lot of local lawyers and talent in the Soo that has some very particular appreciation of the challenges we've faced as a community surrounding Algoma Steel and now SR Steel, and the challenges that obviously that industry faces currently. I think it would have been appropriate for us to have provided Sault Ste. Marie law firms an opportunity to be involved in this process and to have provided their request or their quotations to us. I think it would have certainly come at a much cheaper rate, and then we could have made a decision, an informed decision at that point in time as to whether we wanted to proceed with out-of-town council or local council. But I think this is one of those situations where we really have to be mindful that we do have local talent as well, and we can sometimes keep that money local and maybe do it at a cheaper rate as well.
I think one of the factors, Councillor Romano, I didn't involve myself in this because I really didn't want to be involved at all in selecting lawyers, particularly considering my position, is that the proceeding isn't local. Like, the proceeding is in Toronto.
I appreciate that, and I mean, obviously there's agency arrangements and such that can be made, but it's something that we would have.
Yeah, I understand your larger point.
Thanks.
Councillor Christian?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you to Commissioner of Finance. I just want to confirm how much is actually in the contingency reserve fund. We're looking at $175,000. How much is actually in the fund, and how often Well, I'll let you answer that question first.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Christian, the uncommitted amount in the contingency reserve as of today is about 1.8 million.
1.8?
Yes.
So we're in about 10% of it, so. Are we required, through you, Mr. Mayor, a follow-up question, are we required to have, through legislation, a certain balance in that account, or is that just a fund that, a reserve fund that we grow as a community and use it when we need it?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Christian, no, there's nothing legislated or even in our own policies at this time that sets out the specific level that we have to maintain in the contingency fund.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Christian. Go ahead, Mr. Horstman.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Mayor, I would like to add to the comments that were provided by Commissioner Schell, specifically in terms of the upset limit. I probably should have chimed in too when the solicitor was speaking. Well, we are talking about $175,000 upset limit. That's assuming the worst that takes place throughout the whole process. The intent is we're going to be less than 50. And so that could be done within the CAO's delegated authority, but we felt it important to bring it to Council's attention so that there's an understanding by Council and the community it serves that this is what we're talking about as the potential total amount.
Councillor Turco?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. One of them was the contingency reserve, which has been answered. I support the recommendation, but the questions I'm getting in the community is the amount of $14 million that's owed. My other follow-up to that is I see another article that says 15.1 million. So is that, the question I'm getting, is that for, how many years is that for? Is that 1 year, 2 years? Taxes owed? Michelle?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Turco. The 13.98 million is about half of 2014 and all of 2015. The other number that you're quoting, the 15.1, was when we added the water and sewer. That won't be included on our statement of claim now. It will be on the PUCs.
So the follow-up to that question would be, so this is just basically 1 year, Michelle, that we're owed taxes?
No, this is for about a year and a half.
So previous years have been taken care of? Is that what you're saying?
Correct. There's nothing owed previous to 2014.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Hollingsworth.
I just wanted to make one quick comment. The questions I've been receiving is, can you give continuous updates? And so with restructuring, and I noticed that question through the mayor to Melanie, is it still safe to say that there's the website of Ernest Young's SR Agoma restructuring? Is that still a good website to present to our constituents?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Hollingsworth, yes. Ernst & Young and I can provide all of council with the link as well through the city clerk's office and make sure that everyone has that update, the link, and it'll establish all of the various proceedings, the motion materials, the service list, everything is particularized there.
Okay, any other comments or questions on this matter? Councillor Butland, back to you.
Okay. Thanks for the flexibility. I do want to speak not directly to this, but indirectly. I met with Mr. Horstman this morning, and I met with Mr. Mayor about an hour ago, and they were productive meetings from my perspective. I was concerned that next meeting, my colleague, Councillor Christian, had requested a resolution of the EDC, and it was suggested that Mr. Horstman would have a report for all of us to consider at the same meeting. And I said, well, EDC, city, are we having two conflicting reports? Are they going to complement one another? And I'm very pleased that the reports are coming together as one, and I think that is a good thing. My point, and the mayor was quite amenable to some of the concerns I've had. We've been at this for about 4 months now, and it was brought up at that time that there's a crisis in the steel industry. And I said, we need to raise the profile of the steel industry. And the mayor did reach out to Hamilton, reach out to Regina, and for reasons which are not necessary, I thought it'd be good if there was a triumvirate that went to Ottawa. It hasn't worked out, so we're kind of in this alone, I suppose. My issue is there's a lot of good things happening. The MP Sheehan has met with the Prime Minister and the Finance Minister, and that's good. Mr. Orizeti, our MPP, had an anti-dumping press conference that got a lot of interest. The unions are doing good things behind the scenes. EDC is doing a whole lot of things, of which we're not totally aware of right now. Canadian steel producers are involved in this exercise. The retirees from SR Algoma are in a letter writing campaign, and I received one of them. I hope all of you have received. SR is involved, Tenaris is involved, SeaStec. Most people say, what is a SeaStec? Well, it's important, especially the last time around. My issue is everybody is doing good things, the mayor's office included, but everything has been done to this point in isolation. And I think we need, the mayor needs, and I think I'm certainly willing to do that. Let's bring all of these players together and say, let's speak as one voice. And I think we'll have, the profile will be raised, and some of the issues can be more encapsulated for community and consumption, and that's the big thing. We need to engage the community. And the other thing is we need to engage City Council. Tonight is the first night we've had anything dealing with SR after 4 months. I think we need to become more engaged. And the mayor is agreeable to some thoughts. I think one of them would be, let's have a committee of the whole. Where most of the processes are let down. It's a more freewheeling. And let's have, Brenda Stenta has spoken to EDC, should come here. Peter Warren, who's the recognized steel guru in North America, said, I'll come up to the Sioux for nothing. He should come and present to us. And the unions should present to us. And the companies should present to us. And say, now, is there something as a group that we can put on the table? Next step, I would hope, is we need to go to Ottawa with the mayor leading a delegation, be it 3 people, 5 people, 25 people. And you say, well, who are you to be saying these things? Well, I'm old enough and been around long enough to have gone, this is my third, the restructuring process. And each and every, the previous 2 times we came out the other side, okay. A little battle scarred, but okay. And I think this time we'll do the same thing. But 25 years ago, the community came together en masse. 22,000 people gave $1 each just to say, we want to be involved. The community is involved in supporting Algoma Steel. So under the direction of Frank Sarlo and a whole host of other significant people, they went to Toronto, met with the Premier, and who did they meet? In 48 hours, they made presentations to the Premier of Ontario, 4 provincial cabinet ministers, the acting Prime Minister of Canada, the Federal Minister of Finance, the Leader of the Opposition, and all of the caucuses, meaning Conservative, Liberal, and DP. They're more than happy to hear you. And I really, truly, I think you'd accept. That raises the profile of, hey, Sault Ste. Marie is at risk, steel is at risk in Canada. And it's similar in the United States, folks. And as Peter Warren has said to me on several occasions, you don't want the steel to go the way of textiles. One's soft, one is hard, but there is no textile industry in Canada anymore. You need to treat steel as you do manufacturing. If there were no steel industry in Canada, you'd be at the whatever the other countries were prepared to sell you steel for. It is the foundation of our industry. And just a humor for a minute. The mayor and council at the time thought that they should send 4 or 5 representatives to Ottawa, and some left-wing wingnut said he was in favor of sending thousands of people to Ottawa, steel workers carrying placards. I happen to know that individual quite well. That was me. Anyways, they decided, so we didn't send thousands, but we sent about 25 people to Ottawa, and we were very, very well heard. So thanks, Mr. Mayor, for allowing me this considerable leniency, and I hope that we can have a committee of the whole in the not-too-distant future, and I look forward to the report. I think it'll be a very positive one for all of us as a springboard to move forward.
Thanks. I think you probably will find the report thorough and positive as a springboard to move forward. Any other matters? Anyone other speak to 6.2, or are we done on 6.2? Any other matters in the consent agenda? Councillor Romano.
6.9, Queen Street tree replacement.
Okay, go ahead.
Question for Director McConnell. I spent a considerable amount of time earlier today speaking with Mr. Turco, and with respect to this matter, and sadly you weren't privy to those discussions, so it'll be trial by fire for you. I apologize. I've got some questions surrounding the Queen Street replacement strategy. I appreciate that given the emerald ash borer problems we're facing, as well as difficulties with the other trees and the planters, et cetera, that over the course of the next few years we're going to have to replace all of the trees on Queen Street. My question is, I note from the report that this is a project with respect to the tree replacement portion alone. We're looking at $2 million. That would include furnishings as well, and that would be something that we would put into place over the course of the next 3 years. My question is, can the budget implications of that, and perhaps this will require Commissioner Schell, be transferred or broken up over a 3-year period of time?
Mr. Mayor, in response to Councillor Romano's question with regards to the budget, that is perhaps a question that is better answered by Commissioner Schell.
Commissioner Shaw.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Romano. At this point, there is no funding identified for this project. So it is something that we would have to look at when we delve into our capital budget in more detail, and Council sets priorities as to where they want to spend additional funds.
Specifically, Commissioner Schell, if in fact, and you may have already addressed this and I'm not catching it, but if in fact we were to proceed in this fashion, it is something that we could break up year to year over a 3-year span, is it not?
Again, yes, you could, but we still don't have funding identified for it. We have a set pool of funding at this point, so either you're going to use capital debt and look at the funding strategy through that way, or you're going to have to prioritize this project over another one that already has funding identified.
I guess my concern is we're looking at a $2 million ask, but given the nature of it, obviously it would have to go to 2016 budget deliberations, but we may only have to look at a third of that if it's a 3-year project for the 2016 deliberations.
If you phase it in, yes.
Okay.
I think the CEO has additional comments.
Yes, please.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Romano, and I'll look to the planning director to respond as well. Well, it might be feasible financially to adjust, and it is financially in terms of adjusting for cash flow. I'd like to understand what the operational impacts might be of that $2 million, if there's any impediments in terms of putting it over 3 years.
Well, it's, Mr. Mayor, further on this point, the difficulty is we're going to have some dead trees. We already have a bunch of dead trees, and we're going to have to take them down. So Queen Street's going to be looking pretty barren parts of Queen Street. And the speed at which we replace those trees is totally up to council. I mean, that's a function of the budget. But there, I mean, we have to realize that it's, you know, we've taken down a series of trees, and the rest of them are likely going to come down this year, if not then next year, but we expect a lot of them will come down this year. So we're leaving Queen Street in kind of a tough spot.
I think the discussion on how we do this and over what period of time we do this and how we finance it's one that's properly had at budget time. This is just for information purpose and to refer to budget. So.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Councillor Christian on the same topic.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. My question was asked. I have no questions.
Thank you. 6.2 is 6.9 is done. Councillor, sorry, do you have another? That's something else, Councillor Romano?
That's 6.10.
Okay, we'll just stay with Councillor Romano for now. Then 6.10.
Thank you. You know what, given the nature of my last comments, I'm going to leave this to budget deliberations. I think it would be better said at that point in time. Again, it's for information, so we'll just move along.
Understood. Councillor Bruni.
6.12, household special waste.
Go ahead.
And I guess the question will go to Commissioner Girardi. If the money's not available, the $180,000, what is the next? What's the next steps for it? Are we going to keep it in the same location, or?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Bruni. Well, first of all, the $180,000 is to build spill containment areas that are regulated through the MOE. So it's something that we need to do. And to upgrade the building electrical and lighting to meet building code requirements for a site that holds potential hazardous material. This request, of course, for us is a top priority when we go into budget. Because first of all, we went forward with council's approval back in 2014 and got the approval from the Ministry of Environment to actually proceed and move to this site. So what will happen if we don't move to the site? Well, then I guess we'd have to revisit what we're going to do with our approvals that we have in place. So this will be referred to budget, of course. We hope it's referred to budget, and it is part of our capital from current request, and it is our top priority. So we're hoping that we're going to head down that road.
Okay.
Is that it on that issue?
Yeah.
Anybody else on that issue? Councillor Butland?
Yes, thank you. To Mr. Girardi, is not one of the main reasons that we're moving is to make it a full-time. We are limited now because of this building that housed the hazardous waste. Give us some detail as why.
Okay, through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Butland. Certainly the original reasons that we had went and asked for the approval was we're very congested on our site. It's right at almost a turn, right in Industrial Park. It's a terrible place for people to get in and out of, but it was originally put there just to get things rolling. We do want to operate the site year-round, and it'd certainly be very difficult to do it there because during our winter operations we have a lot of equipment coming in and out. So we'd rather move it to the landfill site where it's a one-stop shop. You'd be able to bring up, drop off cardboard. You wouldn't have to go through the scales. You'd just be able to go to this site, drop your material off, and then if you have other material, continue on into the landfill site. So it's more efficient. We're looking at using the staff that we have, and by moving it up there, right now we're splitting our landfill staff in the summertime because obviously it's located at Sackville Road, one portion of it. We'd like to move it up to the landfill site where we'd have the opportunity to be able to use the staff that we have up at that location to also run this part of the operation. So it's efficiencies, it's putting out a better product for all the, for the citizens of Sault Ste. Marie, where they have one place to go to, one-stop shop, and drop-off points for styrofoam, cardboard, and everything else at the same time. So it really provides a really nice finished look for the city and its waste product.
Is that it, Councillor Butland? Anybody else on 6.12? Seeing none, Councillor Bruni, do you have another one?
6.13, effects of the free garbage week that this PWT provides. I notice in the report that we lose approximately $16,000 a year, $5,000 for advertising and approximately $11,000 revenue for a total of $16,000. Was there any thought put into the process regarding maybe extending the hours a little bit longer from Monday to Friday?
To you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Bruni, first of all, just a little bit of clarification. Annually, we lose $61,000. The $5,000 that we were talking about in there was to divert $5,000 over to advertising for Free Cycle. So it's $61,000 that this free week costs us annually. It's actually a loss in revenue, so it's not necessarily a savings on a budget, but it is the opportunity where you could make $61,000 more in revenue with persons crossing the scales with that material and paying for it.
So I guess my question goes back to you. Any thought by extending the hours Monday to Friday? Because
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Bruni. Well, presently our hours are Monday to Friday, 8 to 5. And on Saturdays, we have one Saturday a month during the winter with every Saturday, and every Saturday in the summer, sorry. We certainly could increase our hours, but of course there's a cost to that because you have your labor costs in there. So if council so chooses to extend the hours, then we could certainly look at that.
I think it would be appropriate if we're going to eliminate the free week, let's give the residents a chance to get to the dump on Monday to Friday, because my concern is the calls that I've been receiving is it does close early for a person that works on a steady days, weekends off kind of thing. And on the weekends, obviously, you know, there's a lineup. So trying to provide the best service possible.
Very good. So we have Councillor Hoopinen on that.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. My question is regarding the effects of free week. I went through the report, and I was a bit disappointed because first we had the annual garbage pickup, which is great. I remember garbage collection at the curbside. Everybody had their garbage picked up, and away it went, and all the yards and all the properties were cleaned up. Then we eliminated that because of cost, and we decided to do this. And I can certainly understand, after reading the report, the problems that they experienced. So what I did is I went online to take a look at the Free Cycle event that the community has been promoting, and I had a really difficult time on that website. It's very difficult to navigate. So it's not anything that I think I would like to put $5,000 into marketing until we're sure that it works, that everybody can utilize it and navigate it a little bit more effectively. I really basically didn't get anywhere, and I do use I'm not an IT person, but I do use computers all day. So I think if we're going to, promote the Free Cycle event, we should have someone that is running that event in the city to maybe do a presentation for us before we decide to spend the $5,000. Thank you.
Councillor Romano.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you to Commissioner Girardi. With respect to the $5,000 for the Free Cycle event, obviously that money is not currently being spent. The proposal is to spend $5,000 for that purpose.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Romano. Certainly, again, it's only a suggestion of putting the $5,000 there. That $5,000 is not being spent at this point. We're only saying if we're going to cancel one thing, here's an opportunity for us to do more advertising about it because it's something new. And we know it goes on in London and several other communities. So, and that's actually, I think, where a lot of us who've brought in our children to university would have noticed it in Southern Ontario. We see things like this being put on the boulevards, and then obviously if they're not picked up, someone takes them away. In this case here, we're asking that the residents take them back in, and then however they dispose of them after that. But it's certainly a good practice. It's been very, I think it's been well received. It's similar to what we used to do in spring cleanup, as Councillor Hoopinen was referring to, years and years ago. The only difference is, of course, you're responsible for the stuff to take it back in afterwards, and it's not the city picking it up.
Thank you. The $61,000 that is referenced as being lost revenue, that's just strictly by taking all of the number of people coming in at $10 a pop over that free week?
To you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Romano, that's correct. So people crossing over with 300 or less kilograms were coming in for free, and that's usually what you'd be paying $10 for.
Okay. So is it fair to say that our greatest concern at this point with respect to free week is the lack of convenience or the inconvenience it's posing on traffic congestion and so on and so forth?
To you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Romano, not quite. What I look at this for is council's been looking for revenue streams. This is an opportunity to find a revenue stream. It's $61,000 annually that we could be losing and that we could be gaining. So we're just saying that here's an opportunity to bring more revenue in, as council has been looking for those opportunities. And yet there is problems. We did explain the problems that we do have during the day. Obviously, it gets a little crazy and we have to bring the police in to direct things. We have people who cross the scale who think everything is for free. So they bring half the house with them and it's far more than 300 kilograms. And we end up having to tell them they still have to pay an amount. So
Right.
there are those issues that we deal with. But I think the most important one that we like to refer to is the $61,000 that could potentially be making.
My next question I'll incorporate into my comment and then I'll stop on this subject. Is there any potential for us to look at this from a completely different lens? The people of Sault Ste. Marie clearly, given the volume of people using it, when you talk about $61,000 in potential lost revenue, one of my concerns is I wonder how much of that we would actually realize if we just went away with this project entirely. Would people really go to the dump site to get rid of this waste, or would they find other mechanisms? One of the other things going through my mind on this is how many people use this in the Soo. It's a service that people love to use. I appreciate there's a revenue stream that's being lost, and certainly that's important for us to gain. But this is certainly, I'll call it a service for all intents and purposes, that people love to use in the city, and that they gain a lot of value out of, obviously, given that there's not a cost applied. Is there a potential that we could maybe do something along the lines of, let's say, have over the course of 6 weeks, every Saturday, have a free dump day, and a person has to bring their assessment with them, tax assessment, and they have to, we'll do Ward 1 week and all the way to Ward 6. This way we're restricting it to Sault Ste. Marie residents only. And there's kind of a mixture of a question here and with a comment, but I'm trusting, based on our current model, that anybody can go to free dump day, and we don't know if they're from outside of Sault Ste. Marie or not.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Romano, we do check.
To ensure their
They do
residents?
have to be Soo residents.
You just asked your last question there, Councillor Romano.
But my question overall is, can we pull that off where we were to do it? Maybe we don't get rid of the service, but we eliminate that traffic congestion by doing only 1 day a week per ward.
Through Mr. Romano, through Mr. Mayor to Councillor Romano, we've looked at many things in the past, including giving little tickets with your taxes where you can grab that slip and go at any time. But there was a study, and it's funny, that study came up and a report was brought to council a ways back in 2007. And back in 2007, I believe the cost to do that was going to be about $180,000. That's why at that time they looked at going with the free week. So on today's costs, you're probably looking at potentially 30,000 people using it. So you're looking at the area of $300,000 in lost revenue if you were to increase or hand out slips, because don't forget, everybody who gets a slip can hand that slip to someone else. You can have to manage the many slips that are throughout the city. So that was one way of doing it. And I'm just trying to let you know that there have been many ways that they've looked at trying to manage something like a free week since the days when we had spring cleanup. And free week was the less costly. So that's why we did it like that. So that's a $60,000, $61,000 cost, today's cost.
Thank you.
Councillor Butland.
One question I'm still asked, and I suspect others are as well. Why don't you reinitiate the spring cleanup? And I asked Susan Hamel Beach earlier today, how much would it cost for a full-fledged spring cleanup?
Thank you.
Guesstimate.
Through you, Mayor Provenzano, to Councillor Butland. Our last reported value to spring cleanup, which was back in 2007, was $375,000. So I would certainly estimate today we would be approaching the $500,000 mark to conduct that.
Councillor Nero.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Girardi, was there a time period between when we stopped spring cleanup and then we implemented the free weeks? It didn't follow right after.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councilor Nero, to give you the exact amount of gap time there was, I can't give it.
Yeah.
But there was a gap time.
Yeah, the point I'm getting to, I guess, is I think there was a gap time, and I think we went into this at the time because we were finding that Public Works and Traffic was filling their time picking up garbage that people were dumping all over the place, whatever was convenient to them, on rural roads and fields, and, you know, just because we weren't doing spring cleanup and they didn't want to go to landfill to pay the cost. So I think that's the reason we did it. That's the reason I fear if we get rid of this altogether, that we might be inviting that to happen again. Councillor Romano brought up some points that I was kind of thinking as well that we could do or implement. And well, we're certainly not going to solve those at this meeting, but did we even consider cutting 1 week off and just allowing one?
To you, Mr. Mayor, to Councilor Nero, certainly those are all options. I was more looking, and I think both Susan and I were both looking at opportunities for revenue generating.
And I absolutely agree with that kind of thinking.
Mm-hmm.
But again, it is a service, and I think that if we cut it out 100%, I think that it's going to cost your department some money to make that up anyway. So I don't know where it all saws off, you know. But I think to cut it off completely, I don't know if I entirely agree with that. And I don't know where we go with the ideas at this point. I don't know if it's a budget item or what. But
Well, the 5,000 is referred to budget. So to Councillor Hoopen's point, you wouldn't be spending that tonight if you agreed with the motion. But if you did agree with the motion, they would be doing away with free dump week. When I looked at this, I mean, this isn't going to be a popular thing to do. There's no doubt that if we agree with this recommendation, we're going to get flack. But to me, the question was a bit different. The question was, can we afford to continue to do this? Because it's not free. There's a cost to it. There's a cost to disposing of all this waste. And just a meeting or two ago, was it a meeting ago? It was a meeting ago. We heard that we're going to have to put, we pressed them on the number, but we're looking at $40 to $60 million into our landfill. We can do whatever we choose to do. But there is a cost to the city of taking garbage for free. And so what we're doing, it's a false economy because we're not actually attaching the real cost of taking garbage to the garbage itself. So, like, can we afford to do that any longer? It doesn't feel to me like we can afford to continue to do it. If we continue to do it, you know, we have a senior staff here saying, look, you know, this is the cost and this is another way that you could generate a bit of revenue, or you know, we can keep on doing it, but here, I think the cost is going to grow. Every year, it's going to get more costly to deal with our garbage. And to have these periods where we don't associate a cost with it, I really don't know in the long term if it's a responsible way to deal with garbage. So it's not a popular thing to do, but it feels to me like it's the right thing to do. So, I mean, if somebody wants to vote against it, we'd have to separate it from consent, and if somebody wants to separate it from consent, they could move to do that, and we would vote on it independently. Any other comments or questions on that? 6.13. Everybody on my list has been exhausted there, so we can move on. Councillor Bruni, do you have anything else? Yeah, I think this was your motion, was it? Do I remember that correctly, Councillor Bruni? Asking for the report, I think it was. Go ahead.
I just want to compliment the PWT. I think this is an important one, and option 2, with approximately savings of the $40,000 would be important. They are correct when they say that schools are closing, sidewalks do not need to be cleared, and I don't think it will be the responsibility of the residents to shovel the sidewalks. I noticed there's a notice of motion on our table tonight regarding winter maintenance, park maintenance, and waste collection. Does this fit into this, or?
You know what, I didn't read that notice of motion until earlier today, so I didn't even put my mind to that. Yeah. I don't think it negatively affects it. So this is going, what was on the agenda is going ahead in any event. If it has some consequence to this notice of motion, it will be discussed at the next meeting.
So, I guess my question to Commissioner Girardi, when will the final results be provided to council? Which sidewalks are removed, and which sidewalks will be?
Well, through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Bruni, if council agrees with option 2, we'll have to proceed and make changes to the existing policy. So we'll probably bring another report back to council mid-summer. And then from that point, the changes can be highlighted, and certainly council will have the opportunity to accept or change or deny the changes that we're putting in the new policy. But once we have an accepted policy, and any changes will have to meet the requirements of that policy. So will council have a say? They'll certainly have a say in the policy. So that's where your direction would come from. But once we establish a policy, the policy will direct how we're going to be putting in sidewalks and what sidewalks would be accepted or not. Presently, you know that we have a petition process in there.
Yes, we do.
But the petition.
Will councillors be involved in the policy setting to write it, or are they going to wait for staff to present it?
I'll pass this on to Susan. She has a further.
Go ahead.
Through you, Mayor Provenzano, to Councillor Bruni. Ultimately, I think what we presented here would form the core of the changes that were made. So we were looking to basically garner support of the spirit of the changes, and we can certainly present it if it's so your desire to be effective on that. If we form a committee, that may be how we proceed. We see presenting another report, though, with the full revised report.
I think it would be important if councillors sat on this committee, because they're pretty familiar with their wards. I'm not saying 6 councillors, but a few councillors to sit on the committee and to participate. And I would like to see it that it doesn't come out in October, you know, a month before winter arrives. The new policy, I hope the policy will be completed hopefully in the summertime, and at least we can talk to our residents in the area that their sidewalks have been removed from the clearing.
Through you, Mayor Provenzano, to Councillor Bruni, we're really recognizing the timing of this is critical. By all means, we hope to present it early to midsummer.
Okay, thank you.
So we have Councillor Christian, whose apparently motion this actually was. Councillor Christian?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just want to make a comment and compliment and congratulate the PWT staff, because I had an opportunity to meet with them after the resolution was passed, and they were showing me, they're trying to walk a layperson through the complexity of actually working through the process and coming up with a plan. And as you can imagine, when you're talking about a network of sidewalks and the variables that go into determining which sidewalks should be included and which ones aren't, it's very complex, and I realize that it takes a while to get your head wrapped around the whole thing. And I think this is a step in the right direction. I mean, there are going to be people that aren't going to be happy if a particular sidewalk is removed. But I do think it's a healthy process that we go through. This is a good example of how a department can look at the way they're doing things and become current, because this isn't just a cost savings. As the resolution stated, there are changes going on in the community, and it was important for PWT to stay up to date with it. So it just, you know, there's still work to do, but I think it's a step in the right direction. It is going to create some cost savings, but more importantly, it's going to be more reflective of what needs to be provided in terms of sidewalk clearing in the city because of the way the city's evolving. So thank you.
The Commissioner would like to make a comment. Go ahead.
Through Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Christian, yes, you make mention of the possible funding that's going to be saved, but there's also equipment that won't have to be purchased if we can reduce this amount of sidewalks that we're doing. And that's very important, because I've come to this council more than once and said that, you know, we're at our max doing sidewalks, we need to start doing some reduction. So that is one reason why we need to be looking at this and making some changes so that we can get it to a more palatable size, something that we can handle better. And I think this is a process that we would go through to do that. Okay.
Councillor Hupinen and then Councillor Hollingsworth.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you, Mr. Mayor, I just wanted to compliment PWT as well on the report. I found it very, very interesting, and it's going to help me as a councillor to answer questions to any of the residents in my ward when it comes to why are they not plowing this side of the street. So it's a great report. I'm going to refer to it a lot and on any emails that I do get. And once again, I have full confidence in option 2 and in the staff at PWT, and it has my support for sure. Thank you.
Councillor Hollingsworth.
I just want to echo that. I'm happy to see that you have put a lot of thought into this. But I just want to, through you, Mr. Mayor, Mr. Artie, as you are aware that Councillor Myers and I have received requests that the laneway between LaRon Avenue and Pine Street be maintained. Now, this doesn't really go with your report, but I think this is an opportunity to educate some of our citizens about laneways not being cleared. And if you can take the opportunity to help us understand that.
Through Mr. Mayor to Councillor Hollingsworth, certainly PWT does not have the resources, first of all, to clean the more than 100 walkways that are throughout this city. Most of the walkways also have bullards at the beginning and end of them, or a rock, or however it's been laid out. So to get equipment in there is going to be extremely difficult. Then even if you were to get equipment in there, now you have all the abutting properties, where do you put the snow? So we would have to actually take the snow out of those areas, remove it every time. So you can just think of this process of how difficult it would be. If we had a piece of equipment that was able to get through the bullets, and you know that we use trackless machines to go down through the sidewalks, if it got in there and broke down, we'd have a very difficult time trying to get it back out again. So we stay away from sidewalks, we stay away from the hub trail. Several users use the sidewalks and the hub trail without any problem. Certainly the snow builds up. What we do ask is that neighboring properties don't blow their snow onto these sidewalks just to make it worse, because there are users and they may be using snowshoes or what have you. Keep your snow off, keep your snow on your own property, and but certainly we don't have the staff, the equipment, or the time to be able to do all these walkways, because there are several throughout the city.
On the same matter, 6.14, Councillor Bruni. Sorry, Councillor Nero, I apologize.
Trevor.
Are you both in the same matter?
Yep.
Yeah. Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Girardi, if you review the sidewalks being maintained, it's possible that streets that have a sidewalk cleared presently may end up with no sidewalk being cleared?
No, if it's a sidewalk that's on our program that makes sense to be plowed, it will be plowed. Again, part of this policy that we're creating, we're going to be looking at a complete loop, no breaks in it. We're going to be able to look at what schools are opening and closed, senior centers, the downtown area, of course, we'd continue doing. So that'll all be part of this process that we'll go through.
But more in a residential setting, a residential street. For example, if a street has one sidewalk that's being maintained, that wouldn't be reviewed at all for usage?
To you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Nero, certainly it would be reviewed.
It
Every
would be
sidewalk
reviewed?
needs to be reviewed why we're doing it.
So it could be possible that a street that has one sidewalk maintained could end up with no sidewalk?
Absolutely.
It could.
Very much so, because there are sidewalks within this city that are being plowed right now, and it's only one specific sidewalk on one residential street. It's not tying to absolutely anything. But somewhere along the line, maybe Susan, you can show a couple. Somewhere along the line, someone petitioned it. The sidewalk was allowed to be plowed, but there's no getting to that sidewalk. So you'll notice a trackless drive down a road because he has to get to the sidewalk that he has to plow. Plows that sidewalk, gets back on the road, and heads back out. It's not an efficient way. It's not a good, I don't know the reasons why some of these were done over time. There's a lot of history here. So that's why we'd have to review them. Susan, can you
I have
walk
a
us
few
through?
examples here. Probably the street names aren't what is important here. What's in red is what is done. What is in blue is at first blush what we feel no longer makes sense to plow. So this is in the Fort Creek area. You have a bus route, you have a major collector or arterial, and then you have extremely just residential areas with all the abutting streets nearby not being plowed. You go to this area, this is more so in the downtown area, further west, actually closer to the bridge. You have some dead ends with very few residential properties even existing any longer, and extremely low traffic. You're probably speaking of those 8 vehicles going to those homes that are in fact traversing that street that day, and in fact we're plowing it. So the whole point would be, we're in fact not on Queen Street or on the main streets, where in fact you need to be getting somewhere and to be safe because of traffic volumes, because I'll use that as the example, for instance, on the dead end of Hudson Street. And we are plowing that. So it is to try to bring about a much more efficient process to the snow plowing routes. I can go on. I have about 6 examples here. This is actually looking at where 3 schools are closed. Again, nothing is set in stone, but we do have St. John's School no longer there. We have St. Teresa's is slotted for closure, I believe, in 2017, and William Maryfield was closed as of this year. So, to take a closer look at these neighborhoods, and do we need to have, in some cases, perhaps just one side of the street done, or do they need to be plowed at all?
And if I may, Mr. Acting Mayor, one more question just to follow up. So ultimately, there's no other option. If you do a review of that street that has the one sidewalk, and your review shows that it shouldn't be plowed for however you're going to do that, these people are going to be walking on the street, correct?
It's correct. Absolutely.
This is a really good example here. I'm sure if I dig through funds, Ford Street may have had a petition in the past. All the other neighboring streets have safe pedestrians walking those streets, right? So, but we go down Ford Street and maintain that. So some things really jump out at you.
Okay.
I'm sorry, Mr. Acting Mayor.
All right. Councillor Bruni, you had a question on this issue?
Well, just to follow up on Commissioner Girardi's comment, he said residents are not supposed to blow snow into the laneways. Who's responsible then to follow up on it? Is it our legal department or?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Acting Mayor, to Councillor Bruni. If someone notices someone putting snow in, they can certainly contact PWT. PWT will provide that person with a letter giving them instructions not to be doing that. If there's any further action needed, we'd certainly be contacting the legal department. I don't know if Melanie wants to add to that, but.
Yes, no. Through you, Ms. Acting Mayor, through to Councillor Bruni. Yes, if there is any issues as a result of PWT's inspections, we'll certainly follow up and assist.
Okay, thank you.
Anything else, Councillor Bruni?
I have one more item.
All right.
Agenda item 6.4, retiree death benefit. I guess the question goes to Commissioner Nero. Okay. I guess in the impact statement here, it says there's a slight possibility that the corporation may be stopped from eliminating this benefit for bargaining unit employees, as this issue was proposed during the early bargaining in the 1990s. So my question is, why is there a resolution if this was a bargaining tool? Wouldn't we continue and use it as a bargaining tool?
Through you, Mr. Acting Mayor, to Councillor Bruni. This has never been raised during bargaining since that point in time, historically. So that's why I was careful in choosing my words in the report, saying that there's a chance. I don't believe it would be successful, but I wouldn't be doing my due diligence if I didn't forewarn Council that is indeed a possibility. But the genesis of the event was born out of bargaining. It has never since been bargained. It's been a policy only. Certainly, policies are open to debate, but it's never been raised again, and that's why I feel confident that it can be pursued in the following manner that I'm recommending.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Kompotic, this issue?
Yeah, thank you, Acting Mayor, and my question is to Commissioner Nero. So Just so I'm clear, and just to follow up on Councillor Bruni's questions, so that were the unions ever involved or consulted with when it regarding this item whatsoever?
Through you, Mr. Acting Mayor, to Councillor Krampotic. During this report, Councillor, is that what you're asking?
During the report, or even what happened back in 1975 and then in the early 90s as well?
Back in its origin, yes, they were part of the discussion.
So I guess what had happened during that discussion?
Through you, now, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Krampotic, the administration of the day deemed that it should continue. They acknowledged that they weren't obligated to continue with the practice. The same concerns were raised some 37 years ago, approximately, that I'm raising now. Certainly, I think they would have had more of an appetite back then to successfully challenge any decision to the contrary. I don't think we're in that position today.
So right now, the policy and the benefit is being paid out?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Krampotic, yes, it is.
And is it paid out through general revenue, or is it paid out through a dividend? How's it paid out?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Krampotic, I'm not sure exactly which account it's born from, but it is a check that is cut from the mayor's, I believe the mayor signs with the CAO, Commissioner, it's corporate, I believe.
It's
savings. I mean, through you, Mr. Mayor, it's
part of the budget.
Part of the budget.
Yeah, we pay it out every year.
Is the city collecting any dividends from an insurer or anything at all? Our current insurer, I believe, is Green Shield, right?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Krampotic, no, there's no such arrangement in that fashion.
There isn't, eh? Okay. So it's funded basically through general revenue then? Okay. In your analysis, you mentioned that there's only 2 municipalities that responded to the survey of 9 that are currently maintaining this practice. And I was wondering, what are the other 7 doing regarding this practice, even though they didn't respond to a survey?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Krampotic, I'm just checking. I'm not sure I said they didn't respond. I believe only 2 of those that I contacted actually have the practice. The other 7 do not employ that practice.
So they're not employing that practice?
That's correct.
Okay. So the union was consulted with in the past, in the early 90s, regarding this. They haven't been consulted with this right now today, what you're proposing, correct? Were any of the retirees or any of the managers that have had this in the past, have they been consulted with?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Krampotic, those retirees that are currently retired, we are obligated by law to continue with the payment. What we're discussing now is moving forward that future retirees will not be in receipt of such payment.
So they'll not be getting the payment? No, exactly. So what we're concerned with is there going to end up being a fight with the union over this? And if it does go to arbitration, what can we anticipate the costs are going to be?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Krampotic, the cost of an arbitration can vary from $15,000 to $25,000 depending on the issue at hand. If there were some challenges raised, I would certainly weigh that against the potential costs and then make a recommendation to council that perhaps we stay the event until next round of bargaining when I can properly address the item if it's raised. Again, I'm not overly concerned. They would have a tough time establishing an estoppel position given the length of time that's transpired. It's not been presented at the table since that time, and I'm confident that we can proceed as I've recommended.
I'm just very concerned, especially with my union background, that if this goes to arbitration, I'm not so convinced that this is a winnable arbitration. And I'm not so sure we want to have a fight with the unions right now. In fact, I even know a union that is considering going to arbitration on this if it is passed. So we can expect there's going to be costs that are going to be coming. And I'm also concerned about having a 2-tiered system where retirees going forward won't be able to have this benefit with our municipality and our unions. So I'm even recommending that if we could just table this until we have more consultation with the union, if that's at all possible.
Well, there isn't one union, Councillor Krampotic. There's 10 of them.
Yeah.
So You want it separated from consent then? So we'll separate the matter from consent and we'll debate it independently.
Okay.
Okay.
That's fine.
Anybody else in 6.4? But I guess, well, we're separating it, so we'll deal with it individually. Any other matters in the consent agenda? Councillor Butland?
166, RFP for sensory play equipment. I could tell from the report what exactly that is, but could you give us more specific detail, an example, say, of a sensory play equipment?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Button. For the sensory playground equipment, we struck a committee which was comprised of various organizations, including the Autism Society, Community Living Algoma, and Rotary. And through that process, the committee determined equipment that they'd like to see implemented, which included areas for to address different sensory needs. So there's musical instruments were included in the RFP, motion play that was available for people that had that might have physical disability to be in a wheelchair. So those components allowed for a fully inclusive play area so that all children could be utilizing the space at the same time. We also included and made sure that rubber surfacing was available so that it made for a transition to the space.
Thank you.
Anybody else in 6.6? Councillor Hollingsworth?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I just want to say I commend you. This is a really, in my personal view, something that's quite positive, so well done.
Okay. Anything else in the consent agenda? See nothing else in the consent agenda, we can pass it over to Madam Clerk, who will read the motion.
I'll read it. I read it earlier, but I will read it again.
Because it's with the exception of
That's correct.
6.4.
So a motion by Councillors Hollingsworth and Fata, resolved that all items listed under date February 22, 2016, Part 1 consent agenda, save and accept agenda item 6.4 be approved as recommended.
All in favor? Carried. Okay, so do you want...
6.4?
So we deal with 6.4 independently. Councillor Compadich, do you want to make a motion to, table 6.4?
Yes, I do.
For what period of time?
Until there's a consultation process between the union and the HR commissioner.
Well, I think we've finished collective bargaining with the majority of our unions for the next 3 to 4 year period, have we not? So I think if you're going to table this, you're going to have to put a definitive time frame on it.
So how's about we table it until the next round of bargaining?
Okay, so you're essentially voting against it. I mean, essentially that's the position you're taking.
Well, it depends on whether or not there could be agreement with the unions. If there's an agreement with the unions, then we're good with that.
So is there a seconder for Councillor Kompadich's motion? He's moving to table this report until, well, no, it'd be 4 years, Councillor Butland, because a number of the agreements are 3 to 4 years, but taking us out to 2018. Is that correct, Commissioner Nero?
That's correct, Mr. Mayor.
You're beyond term of council then?
Yeah, you're beyond our term. You can't, yeah, so, I mean, if you can come up with a motion, Councillor Compadich, that I welcome you to, and if you got a seconder, we'll debate that motion. In lieu of that, I think we should just debate the main motion and you can vote against it.
What my concern is I believe that this should be in collective bargaining and not here in front of council.
Well, it's a city council policy. It's a city policy that was passed 37 years ago, and it was certainly within this purview of council to ask for a review of that policy.
Yeah.
And we've done that.
And there were stakeholders at the table, including the union.
Well,
and that's my concern.
Well, you've got the commissioner's report in response. So, look, the commissioner, do you want to speak to that?
Mr. Mayor, thank you. Just a point of clarification. At that time, there was nothing bargained in the agreements that had life insurance provisions. We've now negotiated substantially increased provisions in our current agreements that far outweigh the amounts that we're talking about.
Well, yeah, I agree. Listen, I brought this up, and I brought it up because I signed these checks, and I saw how many I was signing. And the circumstances of our employees today are much different than they were 37 years ago. Their pay is different, their benefits are different, their life insurance is different. I felt in the context of how we're paying people, frankly, the city staff, they work hard and we have great staff, but they're well paid. And during a time where we have lots of pay freezes across the province, city staff haven't been subject to those same pay freezes. We hear very frequently that a big part of our budget is a human resource budget, and it's hard to affect that. This was, in my mind, low-hanging fruit, in the sense that we really do provide for our employees much differently than we did 37 years ago. It was due time to look and see if this policy was still applicable. The Commissioner of Human Resources and his expertise and opinion in dealing with our unions thinks we can go in this direction.
My concern is that something that they have now, they're going to be losing going forward. Future retirees will be losing this in what was negotiated probably back in the early 90s. There was some give and take there, and I just don't know exactly what that is. And that's why I believe it should be back at the bargaining table.
Understood. Do you want to debate this further, Councillor, or are you ready to vote on the motion? We'll call the motion then. All in favor?
I'd like a recorded vote.
Sure. Recorded vote. You have the pen? I don't hear you.
Okay, thank you. I'll read the motion. It's by Councillors Hollingsworth and Bruni. Resolved that the report of the Commissioner of Human Resources dated February 22, 2016 concerning administration of the retiree death benefit be received, and the recommendation that staff begin the necessary steps required to discontinue the practice of issuing the retiree death benefit be approved. Councillor Butland?
For.
Councillor Bruni?
For.
Councillor Nero?
I'm in conflict.
Oh,
in
I'm sorry,
conflict
sure.
on that item.
Councillor Romano?
For.
Councillor Hollingsworth?
For, I agree.
Councillor Hupinen?
For.
Councillor Kompotic?
Against.
Councillor Christian?
For.
Councillor Fada?
For.
Councillor Turco?
Conflict.
That's right. And Mayor Provenzano?
For.
Motion carries.
So we're moving on to item 7 on the agenda. We're on the council board and committee appointments. This just deals specifically with the committees that are vacant as a result of Councillor Sheehan's election to the federal seat. Councillor Myers just wanted to ask me to make it clear. She was happy to stay on at the EDC until the remainder of the term, but Councillor Hollingsworth has an interest in sitting on the EDC. So in light of that, and since we're making these other appointments tonight, she thought it was just a relatively appropriate time to make that appointment too, if Councillor Hollingsworth had that interest. So I'll leave it with the clerk to walk us through this, because there's a few different committees that we'll have to appoint to.
Okay, first of all, I just have a motion to accept the report, which is a motion by Councillors Hollingsworth and Fada that the report of the city clerk dated February 22, 2016 concerning council board and committee appointments be received as information.
All in favor? Carried. So I believe we're taking this one vacancy at a time.
That's correct. And the first one I have is the Algoma District Municipal Association for the term ending December 31, 2016.
So this is, just to be clear, just for the remainder of this term, which is to the end of this year. But this is to sit on the Algoma District Municipal Association. Do we have the floors open for nominations? Is anybody interested in that committee seat? Councillor Hupinen, are you interested?
Actually, I am, Mayor. I am down as an alternate, so I would fill in until the end of the term if
Okay, so we can have a nomination of Councillor Hupinen then from Councillor Bruni. Any other nominations for that seat? Seeing none, we'll close the nominations. Congratulations, Councillor Hupinen.
Did you want to appoint an alternate to it, or?
Sure, okay. Councillor Nero, go ahead. Do we have anybody interested in being the alternate to that committee? Councillor Hollingsworth, you're interested in being the alternate?
Yes, please.
Can I have a nomination of Councillor Hollingsworth as the alternate? Councillor Nero? Anybody else interested in being the alternate? Congratulations, Councillor Hollingsworth. Madam Clerk?
Okay. The Cultural Advisory Board.
Same drill. Do we have anybody interested in sitting on the Cultural Advisory Board until the end of the year? So I'll just generally give you 5 more seconds, and then we'll move on to the next committee. Seeing none, Madam Clerk, if we can move on to the next committee, please.
The Dangerous Dog Committee.
Anybody interested? I understand this doesn't meet with any frequency. Does anybody have an interest sitting on the Dangerous Dog Committee? Is Councillor Fad interested in sitting on that? Councillor Fad, do you accept that nomination?
I don't have a dog, so I'm not sure that I can relate to the, yeah, sure.
Okay. Anybody else? Seeing none, congratulations, Councillor Fada.
Councillor Hollingsworth to the Sault Ste. Marie EDC then?
So we know that Councillor Hollingsworth is interested in the EDC. Councillor Romano's nominating Councillor Hollingsworth. Anybody else interested in sitting on the EDC? Seeing none, congratulations, Councillor Hollingsworth.
The Municipal Environmental Initiatives Committee for the term ending December 31, 2016?
Municipal...
The Green Committee.
The Green Committee, Councillor Butland's Green Committee. Anybody interested in sitting on Councillor Butland's Green Committee with Councillor Butland? Didn't you start the Green Committee? I thought you started it. I think you did. Yeah. Seeing no one interested in sitting on the Green Committee, we'll move on.
The Municipal Freedom of Information and Protection of Privacy Act.
Is anybody interested in sitting on the Municipal Freedom of Information and Protection of Privacy Act Committee? So we'll have somebody nominate Councillor Christian. Councillor Romano nominates Councillor Christian. Councillor Christian accepts. Anybody else interested? Congratulations, Councillor Christian.
Okay.
Is that the end of them, Madam Clerk?
That is the end of them.
Okay, so we move on to Section 8, which is, we have 2 notices of motion which will be read by Madam Clerk. No debate or discussion on the motions tonight.
So I have a motion under agenda item 8, a notice of motion under agenda item 8.1. A notice of motion by Mayor Provenzano, whereas the Corporation of the City of Sault Ste. Marie has a memorandum of understanding with the Sault Ste. Marie Economic Development Corporation dated September 28, 2009, naming the EDC as the city's lead agency on economic development. And whereas the city provides annual funding to the EDC in the approximate amount of $1.7 million per annum, and whereas the city has a memorandum of understanding with the Sault Ste. Marie Innovation Centre dated April 12, 2010 that identifies the mission of the Sault Ste. Marie Innovation Centre as to drive business growth, facilitate research, and commercialize innovation in globally significant areas of science and technology. And whereas the city provides annual funding to the Innovation Centre in the amount of $277,890 per annum, and whereas the city allocates an additional $500,000 per annum to the Economic Development Fund for the purposes of supporting new job creation, tax assessment, and economic development projects. And whereas the funds allocated to the EDC, Innovation Centre, and the EDF represents the majority of the city's investment in economic development. And whereas the city recognizes the importance of effective economic development and the need to diversify its economy and grow its assessment base. And whereas the city has a responsibility to ensure that it is making the most effective and efficient use of its economic development funds. Now therefore be it resolved that City Council direct the Chief Administrative Officer to undertake an assessment either directly and or with the assistance of an independent third party of the city's economic development and provide a report to Council outlining the following. Best practices and models for effective economic development, how the city's economic development model compares to best practices, and recommendations on what the city could and or should be doing to ensure that its economic development efforts are producing the best results. So that'll be on the March 7 agenda. And I also have a notice of motion by Councillor Shoemaker, Committee to Review Winter Maintenance, Parks Maintenance, and Waste Collection. Whereas the 2016 proposed budget for the Public Works Department contains cost increases for the winter maintenance, parks maintenance, and waste collection divisions. And whereas in the last 3 years, the costs for winter maintenance, parks maintenance, and waste collection have increased more than $1 million. And whereas in 2015, the budgets for winter maintenance, parks maintenance, and waste collection represented a total cost to city taxpayers of over $11 million. And whereas the Council of the City of Sault Ste. Marie must determine how to most effectively deliver services, and whereas the Council of the City of Sault Ste. Marie is committed to finding cost savings in the delivery of services in order to maintain a level of service that residents deem appropriate. And whereas it is essential for the City of Sault Ste. Marie to be a leader in the delivery of services in Ontario, now therefore be it resolved that the Council of the City of Sault Ste. Marie strike a committee consisting of 3 councillors, being Councillor Shoemaker and 2 other councillors, with appropriate staff acting as resource to the committee to review the existing cost of delivering winter maintenance, parks maintenance, and waste collection services, and how, if at all, costs can be reduced while maintaining the same or a similar level of service. Provide information to any service provider who requests information regarding winter maintenance, parks maintenance, and waste collection in order for providers to estimate the costs of delivering the same level of service as is currently provided, and ensure that Sault Ste. Marie taxpayer dollars are being maximized by making the city a leader in the delivery of municipal services. Again, for March 7 agenda. Under agenda item 11, a motion by Councillors Hollingsworth and Bruni resolved that all bylaws under item 11 of the agenda under date February 22, 2016 be approved.
All in favor? Carried.
I have a motion by Councillors Hollingsworth and Bruni resolved that this council proceed into closed session to consider one item concerning collective bargaining. Further be it resolved that should the said closed session be adjourned, the committee may reconvene in closed session to continue to discuss the same matter without the need for a further authorizing resolution.
All in favor? Carried.
And a motion by Councillors Hollingsworth and Bruni that this council now adjourn.
All in favor? Carried. Those ones are signed.